I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. And today we're getting into something that I think a lot of us feel but don't always talk about, which is the emotional side of our fabric stashes. So we're going to cover why stashes tend to grow beyond what we actually use, the guilt cycle that keeps us buying more while avoiding what we already have, and some real strategies for turning your stash into something that feels less like a burden and more like a curated collection that you're excited to sew from. All right, so let's talk about our icebreaker for today, Haley, which is tell me about a fabric in your stash that you've held on to the longest. So what's the story behind it, and do you still plan to use it?
I think that the fabric I've had in my stash that I've held on to for the longest is this really sheer, lightweight cotton. It was gifted to me by a friend when she was cleaning out her stash. And there's a lot of it. By maybe 5 or 6 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty. It has a cream background and a taupe and pink motif on it. She said it was from the 1930s. I'm not sure that it's from the 1930s. To me, it reads as maybe 1980s does 1930s. But it's just very pretty. I don't know if it's necessarily my taste, but I can see the vision of it becoming something kind of cool. I've always thought it would be really cool for I've always thought of it as a special, some kind of special occasion summer dress. I've just never had the occasion come up where it was appropriate because the base is off-white and I don't want all of my summer occasions or weddings and I don't want to wear it to a wedding. And so it's more just nothing has no reason to sew it has really come up. And I don't know if it would work for a practical everyday garment for me. But I don't want to get rid of it because it's pretty and it's special.
Yeah. It's so hard with fabrics like that.
Yeah. So it has survived a few purges of my stash and a move from California to Oregon, and still nothing has become of this fabric. So we'll see. I think now that I have 2 daughters, I'm maybe someday they'll want something out of it and I can make something for them out of it. So I've had this new reason to hoard fabric.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great thing about sewing for kids, at least when they're really little, then you can kind of dress them however you want.
I know, it's good. It's great. I love it. I'm losing that sway with Charlie, though.
Yeah. After a certain point, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Well, for me, what came to mind for me, so we're moving offices right now. We're packing up our old office and we're moving into a new one. And we had these bins of fabric in the back of the sewing room that used to be mine because there was a point in time where I didn't actually have a sewing room at home because my house was pretty small. So I'd actually come here to our office to sew because we had so much equipment here. And so I started keeping some of my fabric here and some of it I just never took home again. And so as we're moving, I went through some of these bins and oh my goodness, there's so many old things in there, some of which I loved and I took home. They had this polka dot silk chiffon in there. It was a white silk chiffon with big black polka dots on it. It's beautiful. So I took that home and a few other things, but then there were also some weirdos in there.
There were some interesting things for sure.
Yeah, some really strange things in there. A lot of vintage fabrics that I'd had for a really long time. But we were just talking about one of them before we started recording, which is this... So I bought this. So there was this event many years ago called Sewing Summit that was just a big sewing conference. And it was in Utah. It was in Salt Lake City. And I went there and I was teaching a class there, and I went vintage shopping with Mina, who used to have a blog called So Weekly. I think her was her blog. And she was doing a talk there as well. And we went vintage shopping, and I found this fabric there it's like probably like 4 or 5 yards of it, and it is a cotton gauze, and it's like a bright coral pink color, and then it has a border print of these like prancing ponies on it, I guess. They're like black. It's like a black border print of these like very stylized 1940s or 50s like prancing ponies.
Yeah, they're like bucking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. They're just they're flailing.
Yeah. And I can imagine like it was probably for like a skirt with a full skirt kind of thing is what it's intended for. But I've held on to this for a long time. It's not me at all. Like, I just bought it because it was cool. And at the time, I have always loved that color. So I guess that's why I bought it. But I don't foresee really using it. So, but I can't get rid of it at the same time. Plus, it has the memory attached to it, so it's just hard.
We couldn't get rid of it either when you had left the stack for us to go through to kind of determine what to keep. And Sienna and I were both like, we got to keep it. It's so weird.
Yeah. So there are a few of those. I try not to keep too many of those things, but they're there.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great way to start this episode. If you have an icebreaker question for us for a future episode, you can leave it for us in a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll answer it in a future episode. You can also leave a comment on Spotify if you're listening on Spotify. All right, well, let's talk about this topic because it is a juicy one today. This is something that comes up constantly in our community and honestly in my own sewing life as well. And that's the complicated feelings that we have about our fabric stashes. Here's the thing. I think most of us don't just have a fabric stash. We have feelings about our fabric stash. We have guilt and excitement and avoidance and attachment, and sometimes all at once. I went through a period of a couple of years ago where I literally avoided opening certain drawers because I knew there was fabric in there I'd spent, all this money on and hadn't touched. And instead of dealing with it, I just go buy something new for a project because the new fabric felt easier to get excited about than what I already had. And it took me a while to realize that this was just a cycle of buying and then feeling guilty and avoiding and buying again. And in the meantime, the stash just keeps growing. And I think this is really common. And I don't think we talk about the emotional side of it enough. So we want to talk about organizing systems and storage solutions a lot of the time, but we don't always talk about why we accumulate in the first place or why it's so hard to let things go. So today we're going to dig into that, and we're going to talk about what drives stash growth, how to break that guilt cycle, and how to do a clear-eyed audit of what you have, especially with summer coming, so you can actually feel good about your stash again. Do you feel guilty about your stash ever, Haley? You're much better at getting rid of things than I am.
I am. I'm so ruthless. I think a moment ago when you said there was drawers that you would avoid opening, I think I can identify with going through periods where I felt that way. Where I think that it was definitely fueled by some guilt of like these beautiful things that I'm not doing anything with, this guilt that I haven't fixed the problem. I think it's kind of like a layered issue. But I think that I'm like I said, a fairly ruthless person. And when it comes to being decisive about things, and I try my best to keep it under control. That being said, there's definitely things that I hold on to just because I can't stand to get rid of them, and it makes me sad. But for me, the thing that's helped the most is to just be really regular about going through my stuff. The longer I leave it, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. I feel like at one time my stash was very much in control. I went through and got rid of a bunch of stuff and organized and cleaned it out. And I feel like it's gotten a little bit crazy again.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is sometimes I have ordered fabrics for videos because we needed a sample of this or we needed a sample of that to show people in videos different types of fabrics.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll buy half a yard or a yard, and then I don't want to get rid of it because you could do something with it. And it's often if they're really nice fabrics. And then they just sit around and I have these like little pieces of all this stuff just kind of like piling up.
Yeah.
So that's been one issue for me. And I do feel kind of guilty about that. But I struggle with getting rid of things. I definitely have like some loss avoidance. So that's a work in progress always.
What do you think drives us to keep buying fabric even when we already know we have plenty?
Well, for me, one of the things is it's like a different mindset. Like I'll buy a fabric because I'm attracted to it and I think I'll find a really good use for it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put it away. But then when it comes time to make something, I'd rather like have the perfect fabric for a particular pattern that I want to make, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And it's harder work to go through your stash and like find it amongst what you already have because you have the constraints of what's there versus just going out and buying something new that's going to be, maybe exactly what you have in your mind already.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's two different approaches to sewing and sometimes they're a little bit in conflict, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that that's my same experience where a lot of times I start with a concept and then it's just easier to outsource the fabric. And I have my best success shopping my stash when I start with fabric.
Yeah.
And then go to concept.
Mm-hmm.
So it's these like two different approaches. And I don't always feel as called to taking the second approach.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard when you have a lot of patterns that you want to make and things you're excited about making. And then it's a little bit easier when the fabric is more, I don't want to say generic, but a little bit more maybe versatile.
Yeah, totally.
Things like, a white linen or something like that, or black linen or something, that'll go with a lot of different projects.
But for me, I feel like those are not the fabrics that I buy and stash. Those are the things that I buy and use immediately because I have like a purpose for it.
Yeah.
I rarely like see a white linen and I'm like, ooh, I'm going to buy
that.
I have to have it. Like,
true.
And I love white linen.
Yeah.
And I've sewn with it.
I do have it in my stash though. I think more as leftovers from other projects.
Yeah.
Though. Yeah.
I feel like that's how that kind of stuff ends up there. And you're like, okay, I have like a yard and a half of this. What am I going to do with it? Do you think there's a difference between buying fabric because you have a plan for it versus buying it just in case?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I think when I buy fabric that I already have a plan for, it almost always gets used. And when I buy it just because I like it and think I might use it someday, I would say like 80% of the time it sits around for quite a long time. So I don't know. It's hard though because sometimes you do just fall in love with something.
Yeah. I find that the fabric that I just buy to stash tends to be like more fun fabric.
Yeah.
And sometimes that works like in my favor and sometimes it doesn't because sometimes with the more playful fun stuff I feel like that's an area of your style where things tend to be more in flux for most people.
Yeah.
The fun novelty print that you were drawn to 5 years ago may not be the one you're drawn to today. It doesn't mean you won't come back around to liking it. And that's not always the case, but I do feel that's like 50% of the time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's true.
Have you ever avoided a fabric in your stash because it reminded you of a project that didn't go well or like a version of your style that you've moved on from?
I think a lot, like when I was talking about some of those vintage fabrics, like some of them definitely are still things that I would wear, but there are other things that, like it's not me anymore. I think the hard thing is when you still like something, even though you know it's not really your style anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard for me to get rid of because it's like, oh, it's so cool. Or it's like that horse fabric.
Yeah.
It's just neat and weird and unusual, but that's not a style that I wear anymore. So if I ever wore it, I don't know. The color I definitely used to wear, but I don't know. That makes it very, very hard for me.
Yeah, I feel like that's the struggle of a weird girl at heart, like, which I am, I identify as, is that like, and when I was younger, my weirdness was I shared it with the world in different ways. And I felt like I needed to share it in a different way. And now it's just a part of me. I don't feel like I don't feel the need to put it on display as much to perform it. So I identify with that, where there's things where I'm like, that's so like quirky, cute, funky, cool. But like, I don't know if I like wear that on my body necessarily anymore. And yeah, so there's a few things, but I have gotten rid of a lot of those things because I know that there's like the young version of me out there who's going to find it at the thrift store and just like fall in love. And that makes
keep that in mind,
easier to part with things sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I also feel like my taste in color has changed quite a lot because I used to really like to wear a lot of color, and I still wear color now. I'm not anti-color, but I definitely wear more neutrals now. And so I feel like color is one of those things that will really attract you to a fabric. You'll see it and just think, wow, that's a gorgeous color. And you'll want it, even if it's not something that you're necessarily going to wear a lot. So I think that's a tricky thing with fabric.
And when you work a job like we do, we're just around fabric a lot. And there's lots of times where like, I'll buy a fabric for a photo sample. I always end up buying more because models are tall. They always need more fabric. And then we inevitably end up with like a yard left over. And then people in the office, are welcome to the scraps. And I feel like you probably do this where you've taken home a bunch of 1 yard scraps from here. I have some of those in my stash and I'm like, this is, just what am I doing? Yeah. What am I doing with this?
Yeah. Especially now that we're moving, there's just so much fabric to take home if you want it. And I took home, we had like this pink jersey I found in the bin over there that was free for the taking. And I took it and I was like, I don't know if I'll actually use this, but it's such a pretty color. I can't not.
Yeah, it was mine. Yeah. It was from the fabric swap. I was like, why is no one taking this? It's so pretty. It's not my shade of pink, but it's so pretty.
It is really pretty. All right, well, let's get into our tips for today. So the first one is to understand why your stash grows in the first place. We've talked about this a little bit, but let's get a little bit deeper into it. So before we can fix anything, it really helps to understand the emotional mechanics behind stash growth. And I've found that there are a few common drivers, and these are things that I hear from you guys, and these are things that I've experienced myself. And the first one is a scarcity mindset. And this is the, if I don't buy it now, it'll be gone forever kind of feeling. And I think fabric stores, especially indie ones, they often have limited runs or limited amounts of fabric, and that does create genuine urgency. But when every purchase feels urgent, you end up buying way more than you need. So that's one that is definitely real for me, and I'm sure it is for you guys too. The next one is aspirational buying. So this is when you buy fabric more for the person that you want to be and not the person that you actually are right now. Like maybe you buy some gorgeous silk charmeuse, even though you've never sewn with anything that's slippery, just because you imagine a future version of yourself who makes beautiful bias cut gowns. I definitely do this personally because I've mentioned many times here, my lifestyle is very active and very dirty, and I love silk. So there's a conflict there. And number 3 is the comfort of possibility. So sometimes fabric shopping is just more fun than the hard work of actually sewing. And a new piece of fabric is, it's all potential. It hasn't gone wrong yet. It's like, buying a new notebook. The blank page is full of promise. And I definitely feel that way about fabric. And I think people feel this way about buying clothing too. It's just like the fun of actually buying it and the novelty of that. So I've been guilty of all 3 of these things, definitely. And recognizing which one tends to drive your purchases is really the first step towards changing the pattern. Haley, which of these resonates with you the most?
I think that probably the scarcity mindset. I love dead stock fabric.
Me too.
Which tends to be a lot. I actually don't buy a ton of fabric anymore. I have quite the stash. So I really don't buy that much fabric. And most of what I do buy is dead stock. And I'm always like, I will never be able to find this again.
Yeah.
I have to get it. And I think that I suffer from that mostly, but the aspirational buying does get me from occasion to occasion.
Yeah, I definitely all 3 for me, really. But I would say the aspirational buying is a big problem for me right now, just because my taste and my lifestyle are a little bit in conflict sometimes.
Yeah.
That's hard.
That is hard. So the next thing we want to talk about is to name the guilt cycle. And then when you know it, it makes it easier to actually break it. So once you've accumulated a bunch of fabric, what usually happens for a lot of people, it goes something kind of like this. You buy the fabric and feel excited. Time passes and you don't use it. You start to feel guilty about the money and the space and the waste. And then the guilt makes you avoid your stash entirely. Because it's not fun to open a drawer that makes you feel like sad or bad. So when your next project comes along, you buy a fresh fabric because it doesn't carry any of the emotional weight that the one hanging out in your stash does. And now you have even more unused fabric and the cycle it repeats itself. I think it helps just to name this. When you can see the pattern, you can step outside of it a little bit. Think of it like a closet full of clothes you don't wear. You're not going to want to get dressed from that closet. But if you edited it down to things that you actually love, suddenly getting dressed is a really fun part of your morning. So that's what we're going with your stash. Editing things down to a point where opening the drawer, the closet, looking at the shelf, it feels exciting and not stressful. Sarah, do you find yourself in this cycle ever?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's very subtle, like the feeling of guilt or avoidance around these things. It's not like you are scared to open the drawer and see the fabric necessarily. At least for me, it's more just like, oh yeah, I could look through my stash and find something, but I'm gonna just find something online to buy. So I feel like it's a little bit more subtle, and that's why it's so helpful to name it and to see what you're doing, to notice your own behavior that you're avoiding it. I think it's a really powerful thing just to notice that.
Yeah, and I think that the cover of the guilt is the avoidance, right? And I think a lot of times we don't slow down to think about like what is beneath the avoidance.
Yeah.
And I think that in this context, guilt is definitely a main character.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how much of our harmful behavior or unskillful behavior in life is due to avoidance, just avoiding something else completely. Something we don't want to feel, or something we don't want to experience, or usually something we don't want to feel.
Yeah. Yep. Avoidance is a very useful mask.
Yes. and it has many forms.
Yeah.
Many, many forms. All right. Well, the next tip is to do a seasonal stash audit with fresh eyes. So one of the most powerful things you can do is pull everything out and look at it fresh. And I mean everything. With summer coming up, this is actually really great timing because you're probably thinking about warm weather projects, and that gives you a natural filter. So here's how I'd approach it. Pull everything out, pile it up all on your cutting table or your bed or wherever you have room, just so you can see it all at once. And then touch every piece. So Marie Kondo it. Just unfold it, feel it, drape it over yourself. Fabric looks really different when it's folded on a shelf or in a drawer than it does when it's held up in the light or against your body. And as you go through each piece, ask yourself a few questions. Do I still love this? Can I picture a specific project for it? Does it fit the kind of clothing I actually wear right now? I did this a while ago, and I mentioned at one point I was really happy with my stash. This exercise just really helped me going through this. I was really surprised by how many pieces I'd sort of forgotten about. There was this really beautiful chambray that had gotten buried under all this quilting cotton. And then the moment I unfolded it, I knew exactly what I wanted to make with it. And it just needed to be seen again. But then I also found fabric that made me feel just like nothing. Or worse, it made me feel a little pang of guilt. And those are the ones we need to talk about next. So when was the last time you did something like this and just audited everything, Haley?
I think it was in the wintertime. We had a fabric stash here at the Seamwork office. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it. And then about a week before my schedule opened up, I was able to go. And I was like, I'll just go through my fabric real quick on my lunch break. Famous last words. An hour later, I sent Erica a photo of my office, and it's just like an explosion of fabric. I was like, I have to walk away. I can't do this right now. I have to work. And I went back to it that night, and I had not intended to do such a full audit. But once I got my hands in there, I could not stop myself. And it felt really good.
Yeah.
And now it's so much more functional. For instance, this weekend I started working on a quilt, and I had a couple of the core fabrics I knew I wanted to use, and but I needed to pick some other things out from my stash, and it took me all of 5 minutes to find and pick the fabric because it was just so much more approachable.
Yeah.
So it had been a minute since I had done it last, and it was much needed. And it's just now my fabric makes me happy again, which that's what we want, right?
Yeah. I need to do this again sometime soon. I just found these basket bins, it's like a shelf with the baskets pull out of it. I found 2 of them at the thrift store. And I think they'd be great for fabric because you can actually see into them and see what you have. I need to figure out how I'm going to protect the fabric from the sun if I use them for that. But now I'm now I have to go through all my fabric and start sorting it and folding it and everything. But I think it will be a really good time to have a closet clean out, especially after we've been moving at work and I took more fabric home. And yeah, it's a good time for it.
Well, let's get into sorting your fabric. Maybe that will help inspire you. So the next step is to sort everything into 3 categories: a yes, a maybe, and a let go. So once everything's out, we're going to sort it into these groups. Yes is for things that you love. You can see a project for it. It fits your current style, your skill level. These are your definite keepers. Then you have your maybes. These are things that you still like, but maybe you're unsure what to do with. And you're not sure if it's right for anything that you're planning. These are just the ones we're going to set aside so you can come back to later. And then your third pile is your let go. This is the tough one. These are the fabrics that you bought for a version of yourself that maybe doesn't exist anymore, or for a project that you've lost interest in, or honestly just don't like as much as you thought you did. we've all done it.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing about the let go pile, though. It's not a failure pile. Every one of those fabrics taught you something about your taste. Maybe you learned that you don't actually love bold florals, or even though like you thought that you should. Or maybe you learned that a certain fiber feels really itchy against your skin. And all of this is really valuable information. I had a stack of really beautiful wool coatings that I had bought when I was really determined to make a tailored coat, and 2 years went by and I still had not touched it. And I finally just realized that I didn't want to make that coat anymore. And those, that was for a different version of myself than the one that is existing right now. And I just needed to let that go. Has something ever happened to you like this, Sarai?
Oh yeah. Like I've had projects in my mind that I thought for sure I was really excited about it at the time, and I'd get a fabric specifically for that. And then, just even this past winter, I was going to make a faux fur coat. Over the winter, I was making the Denise coat was the plan, and I bought everything for it. I bought this really beautiful faux fur. I bought a silk lining for it. I had the pattern all printed out. And then it was like, I think the thing with that particular coat, it wasn't that my style changed. It was that the seasons changed. And I was like, well, now it's like getting warmer and warmer, and this is not really like appropriate anymore. And I'm not going to be excited to wear it, once I finish it. And it just feels like too holiday glam now, and it's January, and I feel like wearing things that are lighter.
Yeah.
So there's that too. There's kind of like those changes throughout the year that you have to take into account as well. So I just gave myself permission not to get rid of the fabric, but just to set it aside and revisit it next winter.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, those things happen all the time. And then finally, give yourself real permission to let go with those fabrics. So this is where it gets emotional for a lot of people. And I want to be honest, it's hard for me too, because we attach stories to fabric. This one was from that trip I took. This one was really expensive when I bought it. This one was a gift. And then letting go can feel like letting go of the story or the intention behind it. But holding on to fabric you'll never use isn't really honoring it. It's just storing that guilt. So here's what helped me to reframe it. That fabric doesn't stop existing when it leaves your stash. It goes on to become something in someone else's hands. So some places that you're let go of fabric can find a new home. You can give it to a sewing friend or take it to a community swap. Our Seamwork community has done fabric swaps before. Haley mentioned we had one here not that long ago, and they're really fun. So if you can find a local chapter, they frequently do fabric swaps. Local sewing groups, maker spaces, school theater programs, those are all places where you can often donate fabric. Online marketplaces or destash groups, there are tons of these. There are lots of different groups that you can just donate your things to that will use them. Donation bins, though, you might want to try the more targeted options first, so you know that it's going to somebody who's actually going to use it. But the goal is to get it to someone who's going to be as excited about it as you were when you first bought it. So, do you have a favorite way to rehome fabric, Haley?
I like fabric swaps.
Yeah.
I really enjoy them. It's really nice to like connect face to face with the people who are taking your stuff home. And I always find them to be really energizing, and it really reinforces that idea that letting go of something is not like a failure. It's a win for that person, whoever got it.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you have a favorite way?
I think that is probably the best way. If I can just give it to somebody directly, I mean, that's awesome too. Fabric swaps are just a fantastic way to make sure that it's getting into somebody's hands. That's my favorite.
Yeah. Or sometimes there's been times where I have a friend who I know is going to like the fabric, and I'll
Yeah.
just like, text them a picture.
Yeah.
You want this?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next, we're going to talk about that maybe pile again. So let's go back to it. The trick with maybes is that they need a deadline, or else they become like in this permanent holding zone limbo. So here's what I suggest. Go through your maybe pile and try to match each fabric to a specific project. Not like a vague, like, oh, this could be like a dress someday, but like an actual pattern, an actual plan. If you can match it, move it to the yes and add it to your sewing queue. And if you go through this exercise and a piece of fabric still doesn't have a home, then maybe it's time to move that to your let go pile. I find that having a pattern in mind makes this a lot easier when I can picture like a wrap top for that rayon print. Then suddenly the fabric has a purpose. And when I can't picture anything, to me, I take that as a sign. Another thing that I like to do is think seasonally. With summer coming, I look at my maybes and ask, is there a warm weather project here? A pair of shorts, a tank top, like a breezy dress? If it's a heavy wool in my maybe pile, it's probably not going to be sewn anytime soon. And maybe to be honest about whether or not it ever will be. Sari, do you find it easier to make decisions about fabric when you have like a specific project in mind?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that just makes everything easier when you can pair them together like that, for sure. I think the hard thing for my maybe pile is just what you were saying earlier before about like giving it a deadline and making sure that you actually do something with it, because it's really easy to just put off making a decision about it.
Yeah. I think that, and if it doesn't feel worthy of your sewing queue, then it speaks to how you may really feel about that fabric beneath that guilt.
Yeah. All right. Well, finally, the last tip is to reframe your stash more as a personal collection. So once you've gone through all of this, the audit, the sorting, the letting go, what's left should feel really different. And I want to invite you to change the way you think about it. So it's not just a stash anymore, but it's more of a collection. A stash is something that you hoard, and a collection is something that you've curated. And I think the word itself really changes your relationship to it. So think about it like a painter's palette. A painter doesn't feel guilty about having paint. The paint is there for when inspiration strikes, and it's been chosen with intention. And your fabric collection should be the same way. Every piece should be something you chose because it reflects your tastes and your current projects or your creative direction. After I did my last audit of my fabric stash, I could open my fabric drawers and feel just genuinely happy looking at everything. Not guilty, not overwhelmed, just full of possibility. And that's when I started actually shopping my stash instead of going to the store. And I think that's something that we underestimate. Like, just having those positive feelings towards your stash is going to make you use it more. All right, well, let me recap what we talked about today. And we went through a lot. And the first tip was to understand the emotional triggers that drive stash growth. So that's scarcity thinking, the aspirational buying, and the comfort of possibility. Next was to name the guilt cycle so that you can break it. Just recognize what you're doing. Then do a seasonal stash audit where you pull everything out and see it fresh. Sort everything into yes, maybe, and let go. And then give yourself real permission to release fabric that no longer serves you. Revisit your maybe pile with specific projects in mind. And finally, reframe what's left as a curated collection and not a guilt-inducing hoard. Well, I think my big takeaway is that so much of this comes back to something that we do talk about a lot at Seamwork, which is that sewing is really all about decisions. And your stash is a part of that. So deciding what to keep, what to let go, what to sew next, those are all creative decisions. And when you make them intentionally instead of avoiding them, the whole process just feels lighter and more joyful. What about you, Haley? What's your takeaway?
I was just thinking throughout this conversation about how interesting it is to have our stashes, our collections, as you like called them, which I think is really lovely, as this like kind of catalog of past versions of ourselves. And I, for one, I'm very thankful for the years that I've lived and for all of the different versions of myself. And I'm thankful that I've had the opportunity to evolve. And I think that that can be a powerful lens to think about this through, that you're not like, when you look at these things that are representative of past versions of yourselves, it allows you to look back on it like with like fondness and sentimentality, but also in a way that's like more like empowering to the current version of yourself.
Yeah.
That those are all versions of yourself that led you to this one right now. And that's okay to let that go, that piece of you go. That's not letting yourself go.
Yeah.
That's just like part of the process of growing. And I think that sometimes, especially when it has to do with like our creativity and the way that we represent ourselves, that it can, through our clothing, that it can feel like letting this really personal part of yourself go. And I think that maybe in some ways it is, but maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. I think that's very insightful. It's it can feel like you're like letting go of part of your identity, or, denying a part of your past. And I think that is especially true for fabric, even more so than clothing, than getting rid of clothing that you used to wear or other things. But I think at the end of the day, you have to remember it's just stuff.
It's just stuff.
It's just objects.
It's just stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And stuff, things that are just things can hold meaning. But they hold the meaning that we give to them.
Yeah. They point to the meaning, but they're not the meaning themselves.
Yeah.
They're just representations. And I think that's important to remember, so we don't get too attached to things that aren't actually important. All right. Well, one thing I want to mention before we go to today, we talked a lot about kind of matching your fabrics to actual projects and thinking seasonally about what you want to sew. And one of the tools that makes that a lot easier for me is just having a real plan to my sewing. And if you want to take what we talked about today and put it into action, you can check out our free wardrobe planning kit, which is a free download that gives you everything you need to create a customized plan for your next season of sewing. And it includes our wardrobe planner, plus tips to help you think through your choices so you're sewing a wardrobe that you actually want to wear. And it's completely free. It's a really great companion to the kind of stash audit we talked about today, because once you know what you have, the next step is figuring out what to make with it. And you can download it at seamwork.com/go/free-planner. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well for you. And if you like this episode, please leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or leave a comment on Spotify. You can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. We're always posting new videos there. You can follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to become part of the Seamwork community, head over to seamwork.com and learn how to join us. And that's it for us this week. I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio.